Hey everyone, with a quantum navigation system, can I be in two places at once? You're watching Techstrong, gang. So can you be two places at once in a quantum navigation system? Mitchell says you could be twice as lost. But if you've ever driven with Mitchell, you'd know. Anyway, welcome to our Friday pre-RSA edition of Techstrong, gang. We're excited. Most of us, well, for those of us who are already out there, you don't have much to travel, but for Mitch and I, we'll be getting on our horses Saturday and heading out to San Francisco for RSA. So very, very excited about that. But we've got other stuff to go over today, including, I guess, some cyber stuff. But let me introduce you to our gang for today who's going to discuss all of this great stuff. First of all, I mentioned we have some folks out in the West Coast already, and they will both be at RSA. We're going to do some Techstrong gangs at RSA, and they'll both be there for that. First of all, she's the lady in red, radio host, marketing guru, Techstrong gang member, Lisa Martin. Hey, Lisa, how are you?
Hey, Alan, I'm great. I'm excited for that it's Friday, TGIF, and really looking forward to next week at RSA with you guys.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, Monday, we'll be doing our DevSecOps event with Mitch is chairing a panel there. But Lisa will be holding down the fort on Broadcast Alley. So look for our live coverage Monday on Broadcast Alley with Lisa. Joining Lisa in San Francisco. Well, it's not much of a drive for him. It's his city. It's kind of like the Batman. You know, they put up the signal when they need them.
No, it's more like Bateman.
Bateman. Yeah, I love those commercials.
In my case, yeah.
Maybe
I'll get there. I'll find my way there.
Maybe you should do a podcast. Anyway, he's our editor at large in the Silicon Valley, Jon Swartz. Hey, Jon, how are you?
I'm good. I'm looking forward to seeing you all next week. I'm going to be there Tuesday through Thursday, and it should be a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Looking forward to seeing you there. Joining us, as I said, he'll be in Colorado, leaving tomorrow. He's going to leave the guitars home. Though there was a time where we used to jam out on guitars, you know, in the Airbnb.
There have been some times. You were right.
Remember those days, Mitch? He's Futurum VP analyst, Mitch Ashley. Hey, Mitchell, how are you?
Very good. I think those were during the Burning Man phase of RSAC.
Yeah.
We sat around playing guitars, then we burned them. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, that was probably at the W bar at 3 a.m.
Oh, that's you. Okay.
Losing the podcast equipment. I'll never forget. Anyway, moving on from Mitch. He's not going to RSA because someone has to hold the fort down here. Chief Content Officer Mike Vizard.
Well, I negotiated a treaty with the czar there, so he has everything west of the Mississippi, and I got everything.
Oh my God! I know. Thanks a lot, Mike, for all those trips to Las Vegas. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, he has everything west. Well, look,
I'm kidding.
And, you know, we'll give him Crimea maybe. Anyway, that was just a little joke. Mike, I opened up, we've got a story up on Techstrong IT about quantum navigation coming out from a firm down in Australia. I think it's a James McGuire story. What do we got?
Yeah, you know, some during the week we cover a lot of heavy duty topics, but on Friday we like to spotlight some things that are kind of unique and different that are coming around out there because we're all geeks in heart. And there's this outfit in Australia called Q Control, and they are building something called Ironstone Opal. And it basically uses a quantum system to tie into the magnetic field around the Earth to create a timing navigation system that's 11 times more accurate than GPS, and it's not subject to jamming and spoofing. Now, I have no idea how much this thing costs and if it's going to work, but, you know, I kind of like the fact that there's some original computer science being done here and quantum computing. Maybe we will have some use case for it. But Alan, I know you follow this space pretty closely. You know, what's your feeling? Are we on the cusp of maybe commercializing some of this stuff or what?
So I don't think this is going to be the killer app for quantum. But that being said, it's exciting to see a quantum-based application, becoming real perhaps here. And, just a quick plug, we are planning to do a virtual event on quantum called, of all things, Quantum Leap. It'll be, I think, next September or October. We're looking for speakers now. So if you're watching this and you're in quantum, give us a shout out and we can talk. But you know what? When I first read this, my thought was, do we really need a system that's 11 times more accurate than GPS? Is GPS not accurate enough? That'll help me if I want to see what room in my house I lost my iPhone in, perhaps, where right now it just shows it's in my house and I have to tear the whole place apart. But, other things to think about, though, is when GPS is a satellite system and it's subject to anti-satellite attacks and weather and sunspots and all of the things that go along with that. Is this a system that maybe is more dependable, more safer, more prone or less prone to attack or malfunction? I'll be honest, I don't know enough to tell you.
That was my first reaction, Alan, is, this could be an alternative to, somebody takes out GPS satellites and now suddenly all of that doesn't work. But of course, the Earth's magnetic core isn't fixed. It moves too. So it has its own challenges. I'm sure quantum can figure it out. But so maybe it is an alternative to GPS when we need one. I would imagine the government might be interested in something like this.
Yeah, the Russians are jamming GPS signals already across flights, and people have to reroute as accordingly because otherwise commercial planes are subject to these issues. And every time there's a war now, somebody's going to jam GPS signals.
How do you know it's the Russians?
Okay, sorry. It could be other people involved in the conflict who are helping them, maybe. I don't know.
I think it's the Canadians that are doing it to us now.
Yeah, there you go.
They're mad at us.
I think it's a couple of folks down in Greenland.
Yeah, or somewhere in the Gulf of Mexico. I was going to ask you, this is
not
interesting.
on this show.
Oh, I know.
Yeah, no, I'm just kidding. Let's move along.
You would think the military would be interested in this, right? As Mike has mentioned, this would be a clear advantage from what's capable, above, beyond capabilities. The one thing I was going to mention, and you guys already talked about it, was just this idea that we consistently hear about all these breakthroughs in quantum computing, in this breathless discussion about what it can do. And here we have potentially a really extremely useful application. Maybe it's not a killer application, but maybe it opens the door to other things. I don't know if this will be a direct link, but it is encouraging.
I'll tell you
I
what
agree
am
on the
worried
encouragement.
about. Yeah. I'll tell you what I am worried about, though. We're hearing from the Trump administration about pulling grants from various projects, and this is the kind of original research that is needed because you don't know what the downstream use cases are and the things that might pop out of this. And I feel like if the U.S. isn't making those kinds of investments, they will show up in other places like Australia, China, and around the world, and we might lose our technological lead and edge here. And I think this is an example where other countries are kind of doing interesting things that maybe we should be doing. But Alan?
I don't know why you'd go to me with this. But that being said, look, that is not new, though. And, I'm no fan of the current administration, but quite frankly, this is a long-standing issue. The fact of the matter is, China specifically has been outspending us on just pure R&D research labs by a factor of 7 to 10 times, 7x to 10x, for going on 20 years. And so when you look at a lot of the innovations coming out of Chinese labs and Chinese technology, it's not Johnny-come-lately stuff that they just stumbled upon. It's the result of the hard basic science that they've invested in for 10, 20 years. And, a lot of this stuff doesn't become commercial right away. But you look back and you realize you can't make that time up, right? There's no substitute for that time, for that hard research. There was a time where students from all over the world came to our university system primarily to do doctoral and postdoctoral kind of work and pure basic research, whether it be in pharma, biosciences, pharma, material sciences, physics, what have you. Not only, the Chinese saw that and said we could do better, and they outspent us, and we let that happen. But now to compound it, yes, the Trump administration is cutting sort of basic research, especially universities that don't want to kowtow to them about DEI and getting rid of whatever their agenda is for education, burning the books and what have you. And so, you're going to make a bad situation worse. But you look at something I always like to point, because I was a 60s child, right? I wasn't a teenager, but I was a 60s child. And to me, the NASA space program was as cool as it got, right? And you look at all of just like the basic science that went into the NASA program that wound up spawning huge commercial products, not just tank, but, huge commercial successes that came out of that space program. We just
It's just,
miss it.
I was going to say, it's so ironic that Musk, who wants to go to Mars and wants to explore these other planets, is in charge of Doge, and he's just taking a wrecking ball to all these research projects. In a sense, I hate to use the word retarding, but they're retarding the innovation in this administration that's surrounded by all these tech leaders who pride themselves on innovation, and yet it's all happening.
Because, John, the problem is the university research system is considered woke. And they want to go, everything is anti-woke. It's here in Florida. I mean, UF and FSU, two of the leading research universities in Florida, had billions of dollars of research grants and so forth. But, as part of the anti-woke movement, poof.
John, this is an existential threat to your kingdom, because your whole kingdom is based on Berkeley and Stanford driving a bunch of startups with a bunch of VC money wrapped around it. And if China or some other country grabs up the VC dollars and puts it next to a university, I got news for you. The Valley's not going to be the center of the world that it used to be.
Yeah, that's a definite concern. Plus, at the same time, while that's going on, we've got like these antitrust cases going on where these companies might be divested. It might have an impact on how they innovate, but it also might open up, by the same token, the pathway to creativity or innovation or invention for other companies. But yeah, you're right, Mike. What it all comes back to is the university system. I mean, Stanford produced Google, among other companies, Yahoo. We go down the list, HP, etc. And that is actually, it could be an existential crisis, because someone else in another country will come up with an idea, will come up with the funding to jump or leapfrog them. And I think I'm not sure if this is happening with this story that we're talking about, but I think we're going to see more examples of it. And it's going to be a growing problem, if anything, at least for the next couple of years.
Oh, couldn't it spur more innovation and more competition? That's how I look at it.
Yeah, the antitrust stuff will, definitely. It will among smaller companies.
Yeah, I didn't say it was bad for us. I just said it was bad for John. So
yeah, no, I'll
Just
survive somehow. Yeah,
Just
yeah.
ration.
I have a love-hate
The czar will
relationship.
be okay.
Come on, his
He's made it
collection
this
of
far. I think he'll
Fabergé
be
eggs
fine.
alone are worth a fortune.
I have a love-hate
Lisa,
relationship
from a
with the
branding
Valley.
perspective,
So whatever happens to them, it'll go off my back. I really don't care about them. Yeah, but they've just gotten too big and too greedy. But that's another episode, another show.
Lisa, from a branding
Yeah.
perspective, total aside, one of the things that just struck me about this company is their name is Q Control, because I
Yeah.
immediately dyslexic, read it as Control Q. What is that software called? Control Q? Oh,
Yeah.
dang! I quit the quantum based navigation system accidentally.
Mhm. I could
Well,
see
I think
Mitchell
that
getting
some of the
lost
messaging
already. I'm sorry. Go ahead,
there you go.
Lisa.
That's how it happens. It's purely innocent.
I think from a branding perspective, they have some really good messages out there. They talked about achieving accuracy in some of their trials, comparable to a sharpshooter hitting a bullseye from 1,000 yards away. They also say publicly, this system is 50 times more accurate than GPS backup systems. And they said when it's used aboard a plane, it's actually been better, I think, performance wise by over 10x. So I think their tagline is nice and clean. Make quantum technology useful. They've got some great customer examples: Imperial College, Northwestern University. They've got clear solutions for Earth observation, defense and space, positioning and navigation. So I think from a branding perspective, I was impressed with what I saw. And they had some really strong metrics to back up what they've achieved so far. I thought it was really interesting and could really spur more innovation.
Excellent. All right. We're going to stay right here while we also go for a break. The cat's out of the box. You're watching Techstrong, gang.
Hey folks, we're back and we're gonna have a little chat about what NVIDIA is up to. They finally delivered on this NeMo microservices platform that they've been talking about for a little while now. But the interesting thing about this, Mitch, and I'd love to get your opinion on it, is they're kind of describing the creation of data flywheels. And this is essentially middleware for developers, and you can constantly pull data from multiple sources that you can then feed into the LLM. So it's always kind of constantly up to date and continues to learn and is reinforced. And it almost feels like RAG on steroids to me. But are we getting to a point now where the next wave of these things are all going to be updated in near real time?
Well, it's a great question. To me, it's a signal of NVIDIA increasing its focus on the agent side of this, right? Not just on the training elements. And of course, software developers are very familiar with microservices and containerized software, things like that. So that part should be familiar. But I like your point about RAG, because it kind of felt like this is the back door, the trap door to get around current RAG systems and do it directly through the NeMo code, their architecture. So if you think about it, oh gosh, this is a way to capture more, not just mind share, but kind of lock in more development into the NeMo software frameworks. So it's a smart move for them. I'm not sure if there will be places where it's better to use the NeMo framework for this versus using a RAG solution, or will people be suspicious about it and say, I don't want to put it all behind their APIs and their framework and their library. So we'll see. But I think there's a little bit of more mindshare capture of the developer space and keeping them happy in the NeMo ecosystem.
Mm-hmm. To me, it's another example of how NVIDIA is quietly morphing into a software company, if you think about it. Yeah, God bless them on their GPU research, but there'll be other chips and other AI accelerators in the future. But I think that John, your take on this, but I feel like they're kind of...
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. When I think Jensen had his keynote a few weeks ago, that was one of the recurring themes in the day. There was a pre-show before the event, and there were a number of executives on who talked about this idea that NVIDIA actually, the secret sauce, the secret weapon, is becoming a software company. And I think as part of this announcement, the view at NVIDIA is that every AI agent's going to need a data flywheel, right? That's the concept. And when I think about the way this is positioned, and it kind of relates to something that JP talked about yesterday, with all these different AI agent platforms, or at least a couple of dozen in recent weeks, it kind of gives NVIDIA maybe a practical, pragmatic approach to address the folks who are overwhelmed, like the IT people who are overwhelmed by all these AI agent options. And I think that's critical. And one other thing is that I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday who has been tasked with putting together an AI agents panel for a group of Fortune 200 companies on the East Coast in June. I can't mention the name of the companies, but they are huge. And this is the reason why they're doing this panel. They have absolutely no idea what to do with AI agents. They're terrified about compliance. They have a fear of missing out, and they're trying to get up to speed. They know they have to do it. And when they see something like this, maybe it eases their concerns if they're even aware of it. But we talk on this show about how AI agents and AI in general is pushed beyond the hype boundaries. And we're thinking about or talking about things that are going to happen in a year or two. On the flip side, these companies, and these are major companies, they don't even have a fundamental understanding of what's going on, and they're really scared.
Mhm. I think we're getting close to Mitch's point, though, about democratization of the access to the data, because a lot of developers historically haven't really manipulated a lot of massive amount of data. And when you get into LLM, you have to manage a lot more of that. I've harkened back to when we had a hackathon about a year and a half ago, I was just kind of pleasantly smiling to myself as I watched all these developers learn the fundamentals of data management. And it was kind of like, hey, welcome.
Discovery. Yeah. Well, in a way, this is a competing alternative to MCP, Model Context Protocol, which has taken off, like a storm, which is essentially a gateway or a server to get access to data through agents itself. So, this is to me is an alternative to that. Of course, it's a proprietary alternative versus an open standard. But then again, the way MCP is implemented is all these companies are building their own MCP servers anyway. So it's their software. So
Yeah, I think NVIDIA is making a case for shoving that into the development environment itself, where it becomes more accessible versus all those MCP servers where, you can wind up with hundreds of thousands of those things you're trying to invoke. And that doesn't seem easy to me. It seems like this is an abstraction layer above that, but we'll see how it plays out.
that's my concern about MCP is, are we creating an whole landscape of MCP servers we've got to maintain and mess with?
Yeah. Look, I think the bottom line here is you got to recognize that, Mike, I think you were dead on. NVIDIA makes great GPUs, but really they are locking in the market with their software. And with an open source spin too, right? They have open source, they have, but they're locking in market with software.
I got $20 that says the open source community has an equivalent of this within the next 4 to 5 months, but who knows?
Okay. Anybody want to do that? Any takers?
I think John said he's working on this right now.
Yeah. Among other things. Yeah, I'm trying to just trying to keep my head above water.
Doing a little vibe coding, aren't you?
A little vibe.
Oh God, yeah. Oh my God, we're
All right.
yes.
Let's take a break.
coming up.
We'll come back and we've got our next block, drone tracking by the NYPD. You're watching Techstrong, gang.
Discover Techstrong Group, the epicenter of tech innovation. We're your go-to for reaching IT leaders and practitioners worldwide. Our secret? Impactful content that sparks awareness, engagement, and top-quality leads. With us, you'll access editorial websites, streaming videos, virtual events, custom content, analyst research, and more. Join our satisfied clients. Let's revolutionize your tech journey. Contact us today and tell your story to the world in the most powerful way with Techstrong Group.
All right, we're coming up on, it's a follow-up really on a topic that we discussed. It feels like maybe it's been 6 months. I don't know, time is flying, but we had what amounted to a drone scare here on the East Coast. We had a bunch of drones flying around New Jersey and New York, and eventually the government copped to the fact that they knew about it all along, and everybody was kind of panicking. And now the New York Police Department is saying that they are going to have some tracking software for drones, and they're going to be able to at least know which ones are in the 5 boroughs and which ones are flying around. I don't know if they can extend that into New Jersey or Westchester County, but I feel like every city is going to be doing something similar, Lisa. And, is this kind of the next wave of law enforcement?
I think it absolutely could be, and I think what the NYPD is doing here with counterterrorism is fascinating. Obviously, you mentioned time flies, and I'm like, "Oh, pun intended." Because we talked about this huge issue a few months ago that was major news for weeks and weeks. Well, what NYPD is doing with its counterterrorism group is enlisting this drone-aware technology to monitor these unmanned aerial vehicles that are in the city skies, and the growing what we're seeing is this growing popularity of consumer drones. And that poses potential safety and security challenges. I think of like large scale events that New York City has, parades, sporting events, the tree lighting at Rockefeller. So, what they're aiming to do is detect systems, these unidentified vehicles, and that are flying within New York City airspace that could pose a credible threat to public safety, to city facilities, to infrastructure. In fact, the department already has a fleet of its own and has over 100 certified drone pilots. So I think it's interesting here. This could be uh, the impetus for many other cities to do the same thing, especially where public safety is concerned. I sit in my backyard a lot and work out there, and there's a kid that flies a drone around. Hi. And I'm sure it's harmless, but we're seeing more and more of these, and the police want to understand which ones are benign, which ones pose credible threat. And I think it's going to be an interesting use case, and we'll see how far this gets adopted broadly across the states and across the globe.
So, John, do you envision a world where each police department is going to have its own drones that will go shoot down other drones? Is that where we are now?
Yeah, that could conceivably happen. I mean, the military, I remember years and years ago doing this story for USA Today, and we did it with CNN. And the whole thing was about, I went down to Edwards Air Force Base, and it was about drone warfare. And even back then, they talked conceivably about drones becoming smaller, becoming more mobile in terms of their ability to avoid detection. I mean, the one thing, Mike, that a couple of years ago, also, I went to Honeywell, and they do a lot of drone technology. And one of the things they were talking about is the FAA has registered more than 1 million commercial and recreational drones. So they're all over the place. And I'm just wondering who, I guess they're ostensibly responsible for air traffic control, but they only can do so much. And I actually think even like your small police department might, even like somewhere in Kentucky or Louisiana or Utah, I'm just throwing these states out randomly. There's no political agenda behind it, but they would actually have some sort of drone police, a division, which would be autonomous. I'm just speculating, but I think this is clearly a possibility.
So I look, this is a bigger problem than you think it is. I think if you look at what's changed in modern warfare, you look at what's going on in Russia and Ukraine, you look at what's going on in the Middle East, Israel, Palestine, Syria, the Houthis, all of these groups. Drones are game changers. Whether they're these suicide kamikaze drones that Iran makes, that Russia's using, or the homemade, the Ukrainian-made drones that have been so effective, even attacking Moscow, right? That's nation-state drone usage. But the not insidious, but the dark side of these drones is you don't have to be a nation state to build 10, 20 drones. And they're not the big US drones that are really unmanned airplanes, right? They're small drones, but they could be packed with explosives. And they, there's no pilot, they're kamikaze drones.
Alan, take a page out of Dune. Remember the hunter-seeker?
Sure, the hunter-seeker
right?
stuff.
You can imagine law enforcement having, and there's a lot of effort on miniaturizing drones, both for military, but that'll make it into the private sector. You can imagine the police force having to deal with what happened to this person. They got poisoned. It wasn't a gun that shot him. It was some kind of a hunter-seeker drone that poisoned them or did whatever, went into the house or the room and exploded. It's not, we aren't too far from that being a reality, I think.
I actually think you're right, Mitch. I think I can see that. Like somebody gets upset with someone else, a neighbor, and they send their drone in with a small explosive. And I definitely think something like these type of situations are gonna happen. It's gonna open up all sorts of law enforcement issues and personal safety and security. It's scary thought, but it's a realistic
You
one.
know,
It's
again,
those
it's,
damn
it's why we
Harkonnens.
can't
They're
have
the
nice
big-
things, because
Well,
it's
it's those damn
Yes.
Harkonnens. They're the one that always
Yeah.
do this kind of stuff.
Speaking of that, on behalf of all our good friends at the NRA, am I allowed to shoot at these drones if they're over my airspace, over my house?
that depends.
Something
Are
tells
you
me
in the
no.
South?
You send your counter drone to as your guardian, right, to shield you. I mean, it's
All
going to be
right.
crazy. It's going to be an escalation of absurdity.
I don't know,
does the
Mike,
sec-
but let us
does-
know how it turns out, if you would.
Does the Second Amendment extend to my anti-drone thingy? How are we going?
Well,
with
no, but here in Florida, if you felt the drone was threatening you, clearly, you can't give a drone more rights than we give people. We could shoot people if we feel threatened. Why couldn't we shoot a drone?
Good point. Drones are people too.
But that being said, look, I like it. One of my friends, Bill Gerstein, is a drone dude. And sometimes we take him out, we go out on my boat with him and he'll fly his drone overhead. And it takes great video of the boat on the water. It looks so beautiful. And there's so many good uses. I mean, here in Florida, it's changed the property inspection business. People want to go inspect your roof. Man, they inspect your roof, for good or bad. So again, no pun intended, but it's why we can't have nice things. There's so many good uses of these drones. It would be a shame if we had to start really regulating drone usage and payloads and where they can fly because of the potential for harm. It's
like any technology that's inherently neutral, but it can be used for good or for bad. And then the question comes in about regulation. I'm very curious to watch this use case in New York City. It's the largest metropolitan, I think, area in the U.S. And what does it have, Mike? Like 8 million residents across the five
well,
boroughs, or
across
is
the
it even
5 boroughs,
more?
but the New York metro area is 15 to 17 million people.
What? Okay. So it's going to be interesting to watch this and see how it plays out, what the positives are, what the negatives are, and then how not just New York can learn, but others as well. So that, to your point, Alan, we can still have drones and have nice things in a safe way.
I mean, I'll go one better. What happens when we start putting some AI on these drones? And now we just tell the AI what the mission is, and it does it.
With a quantum GPS.
With a little quantum GPS, exactly.
So you have the data flywheel, which is told how to attack the certain vector with the enhanced GPS.
Don't think bad guys aren't somewhere thinking about that.
It's
Oh,
gonna
for sure.
it's gonna change the boating experience too, because there are some folks that like to hang out in all their glory, and now there'll be a drone taking pictures. So
Those folks like to get their pictures taken.
They're asking for it.
Yeah. Anyway, interesting times indeed. Interesting times indeed. Guys, we're going to wrap up our Friday edition of Techstrong Gang. If I'm not mistaken, right, we still have a day of AI infrastructure tech field day on today, as well as some other great Techstrong TV. Actually, we have some pre-RSA interviews that I've been doing all week, including one with my friend Cecilia Marinier. Cecilia runs the innovation and scholar programs at RSAC conference. So this year we have our 20th anniversary of the Innovation Sandbox at RSAC. All 10 finalists get $5 million each from Crosspoint Capital. There's also the RSA Launchpad for companies just coming out of stealth. Cecilia and I talk about all that, as well as their scholar program and a whole new setup they're going to have this year. There's a lot on Techstrong TV today. Stay tuned for that. We will see you on Monday in San Francisco. Have the flower in your hair, as they say. Until then, this is Alan Schimmel. Have a great weekend, everyone. We're out.